Well, joining us now is retired IDF Colonel Miri, now a senior fellow at the International Institute for Counterterrorism. Miri, thank you for joining us. President Trump, as usual, sounding optimistic. Clearly, he wants to have some kind of deal. A lot of skepticism here among Israeli officials. Do you share that? And what about perhaps the possibility we might even see a ceasefire during a negotiating period? Some people are even talking about maybe even a 60-day ceasefire.
One of the things we always forget is that with every military campaign, it does come to an end. And the question is on whose terms and at what stage. Right now, President Trump, I am putting aside the rhetoric. I'm sitting here as an Israeli. You and I both, Kalev, here in Israel. In the last just few hours or last days, we go to our bomb shelter, we come home. We go to our safe room, we come home. We're very aware of what the Islamic regime still has. I don't think that there will be an endless war. This is going to end, and I think that we're already past the halfway stage, if I can call that. Will it end tomorrow morning? Will it be a ceasefire that will be like it's been in other places? A ceasefire doesn't mean that it's peace and everything stops. It means that you have some agreed parameters. Those are things which I think the United States is much more heavily involved in right now. In the meantime, Israel is continuing to attack all the different type of list of targets that you talked about before. So we're still on the go, and when we need to stop, we will know how to do so.
Right. Well, let's talk about that. Iran, of course, the regime is weakened. Of course, President Trump said that no nuclear weapons, no enrichment. There's this 15-point plan, but it's going to be negotiated. What should be Israel's red lines in order to end at least its offensive against Iran?
So there are two different things here. For the last 30 years, Israel has been at the forefront of the fact that Iran should never go nuclear. And I want to say happily, that is something that the entire world has understood and has stood up for. I think that the second thing is that Israel does not believe Iran, or I should say do not believe this Islamic regime, and we haven't believed them for the last 30 years. And at the end, sadly, we've been proven correct time and time again. The Islamic regime lies. It wants to build nuclear weapons. It's trying to build nuclear weapons. It's doing it in a variety of different ways. They've said in the past that they wouldn't enrich. They enriched. They've said in the past that they don't aspire to weapons. They aspire. So you have to go within the arena that we don't believe them. So you want to put in very clear type of limits where you are overlooking it. Remember that we have absolute air superiority right now over all of Iran. That is a huge military capability. And that means that if they don't abide by what needs to be done, no nuclear at all, then both the United States and Israel have that capacity to continue doing what they've been doing for the last 26 days.
Right. Now, of course, the nuclear issue is paramount, existential for Israel, but Israel has other concerns. Iran's conventional ballistic missile program, its support for its terror proxies. How insistent should Israel be that those be red lines if it faces the prospect, for example, of the Trump administration lifting sanctions, leaving the regime in place and lifting sanctions that will strengthen it in the long term?
Well, one of those things that comes up all of the time is what will that regime do? Will it yet again, like it did after June of last year, or even after November when Israel and Lebanon signed a ceasefire that had to do with Hezbollah, that main Iranian Islamic regime proxy? So I think that Israel right now is clearly diminishing and degrading the missile and drone capability in a variety of ways. It's going after the launchers. It's going after the launch sites. It's going after the arsenals of weapons. It's the places where they do the R&D to do a lot of new different types. And also Israel, both together and separately, Kalev, started a ground operation together with an air operation against the main proxy, Hezbollah. This, of course, after Hezbollah made a clear-cut choice on March 2nd to join in with the Islamic regime. I think for Israel, the main aspect will be that in any agreement now that the United States arrives with the Islamic regime, whoever there is doing that, because that's not directly Israel, the campaign that Israel is doing to diminish and degrade Hezbollah in Lebanon will be be separate and will continue. That's on our northern border. As you mentioned before, we had a young woman, 27 years old, driving in a car, got out of the car because of the alert and was killed by a Hezbollah rocket. And when we're talking a Hezbollah rocket, that means an Iranian-made Hezbollah rocket.
Right, but of course, Miri, Israel came to a ceasefire agreement that was overseen by the U.S. Last year, where Hezbollah was supposed to be disarmed. Clearly, as you said, every day we see that Hezbollah has not been disarmed. Israel may come under similar pressure for another such agreement when the Iran war, if and when it ends. So how is it going to ensure that it doesn't come to another agreement that really will not have any substance to it?
There are real big changes that are happening inside Lebanon. And if there's one thing that gives me a positive outlook, it's the fact that in the last 26 days, Lebanese, and I'm not talking about the common Lebanese, I'm talking about the Lebanese president, prime minister, and foreign minister have openly said that the reason, the fault for everything happening in Lebanon right now is Hezbollah, not Israel. Israel has been very clear in targeting Hezbollah targets, both in the south and in Beirut and in the Bekaa Valley. This is not Israel against Lebanon. And when you talk about, so how do you ensure, maybe, perhaps, we want to hope, but you got to also help them a bit, if this new Lebanese government that is openly willing to outlaw Hezbollah, Kalev, they're willing to banish the Iranian ambassador from Lebanon. These are huge steps for the Lebanese government, and they're the ones that can perhaps be the ones that hand in hand, it's not an easy process, will disarm Hezbollah. So I really do think that that could be a major game changer. It definitely impacts Israel. It doesn't mean that Hezbollah won't have yet another missile to fire, but it means that they can be pushed aside within Lebanon. That's the best for us all.
Right. Miri, you mentioned how this conflict is being a game changer for Lebanon. But if we're looking at the region in the Middle East, not just Lebanon, I mean, we're seeing really major geopolitical shifts underway in the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, in terms of their military posture towards it, even in countries like Qatar and Oman. What are the opportunities that Israel perhaps could take advantage of, may have to, if it is going to have to restrain an Iranian regime that at the end of this war is weakened but still standing?
Let's say it's weakened and still standing. Let's look at the countries that are nearby. At the end, Israel is over 1,000 miles away from Iran. If we look at Qatar that you mentioned, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, or Saudi Arabia, let alone Oman, all of these countries right now have directly been attacked by this Islamic regime. They've been targeted by them. They've had ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, drones, different types of capabilities thrown at them over these last 25 days. This brings about an opportunity, and it's horrible that war does this, but it does. It's about a security coalition. It's about seeing together that this regime, you can't believe it, all of these countries for so many years cultivated a hand-in-hand relationship with Iran. They did nothing against Iran on February 28th, and yet this Islamic regime attacked them. And I think that there is the possibility here for, I don't call this isn't about, peace and everybody's happy, but about working together with all of these countries against a joint threat to make sure it's diminished, it's degraded, that Iran and that Islamic regime are not the ones defining the rules of the game in the Middle East.
And Miri, finally, I want to ask you, I mean, obviously, as we said before, even if the war would end today, the fact that the Iranian regime has been weakened, that is a huge gain or benefit for Israel. But is it too early to say potentially what are the lessons, both positive and less so, that Israel has learned, at least from this conflict so far?
I actually think that Israel's portion within this conflict, we've implemented lessons of the last 2.5 years. I don't think that we expected instant regime change. It's about enabling that possibility. What Israel has been doing prevent and preempt. When the Islamic regime openly calls for the annihilation of the State of Israel, the Zionist entity, we're not sitting around and waiting. We're going after the different capabilities that they built all of the years. It doesn't make me happy happy, it doesn't make it easy, but the idea is that terror organizations, terror regimes, terror entities don't get to define the rules of the game. I think these are lessons that we learned. We still need to implement more of them, but the strongest lesson for me, Kalev, is that we cannot only have our military prowess, and look at me with my fist right now, we also need to develop that important diplomatic muscle. It goes hand in hand. That's what could bring together a better future, a coalition, difference with Lebanon, let alone with all of the Gulf countries.
All right, and perhaps those opportunities will arise, and they can be utilized to secure Israel's future. Colonel Miri Eisen, thank you so much for joining us on ILTV Security Brief.
Thank you so much, Kalev.